This is going to be a quick tutorial on how to use the Tiki Toki online timeline maker for your Canada and World War II timeline assignment. The program's really straightforward if this is one of the things that you choose to use. It's very powerful. It lets you make, with a free account, a fully functional 200 entry timeline. We're not going to use anywhere near that. And it's really easy to use. Your timelines can be really quite impressive by the time you get things done. Now, before I started, I went and prepared a bunch of stuff before I started going. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you an example using World War I and some of the information that you're familiar with, and you're going to be producing one for World War II. And what I'm going to do in this tutorial is make a timeline, show you how you prepare different parts of the timeline, and then I'll do some entries, I'll pause it, I'll propagate more stuff in it just to show you the way things are going to look. So once you've made yourself a free account, I come in later. You can come and go as you please, work on the same timeline over and over again. I'm just going to go to my account. I'm going to create my new timeline. So I'm going to call this one Canada. And oops, how have I spelled? And World War I. Let's see. You can put a background image in. I'll throw my background in later. I'm going to leave these as defaults. The highlight color will be the bottom color along the bottom of the timeline. That can also be changed later. I'm just going to leave it as the purple for now. I'm going to pick the start date. Well, I've already done a little bit of work, so I know my start date for the war is in 1914. For some reason, the program doesn't like my number pad, so I use my numbers up at top. So 1914, and I'm going to go to June 28th is my first date, which is going to be the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand, even though that doesn't start the war. And in times, unless you know the specific time of something, just put in all zeros for the time. That's probably going to work best for everything. So we're going to start June 28th, 1914. I'm going to hit confirm. And my end date, I do know my specific end date. My specific end date's in 1918. And we're going to go up to, let's see, November 11. And this one, we do know a specific time, 11 o'clock. On November 11th, 1918. So I'm going to confirm that. And then I'll just hit create my timeline. When I hit create my timeline, it creates this work area. Now, we're going to do most of our work up here in the right corner. And up in the right corner, it's got my timeline. There's stories. Settings, we're really not going to have to play with. Categories, we will. I'm actually going to set up 2 categories, which is going to allow me to divide my different entries up into different categories. As the assignment for the World War II one has 3 categories, I'm going to make 2 for this one. I'm going to make 2 categories. I'm going to hit categories. I'm going to hit create a new category. And my first new category is going to be called The War at Home. And this is going to be all the events directly related to Canada back home. And I'm not going to leave it as a purple. Well, because we're in Canada, I'm going to make it a nice red color. And a little darker red, not a blow your eyes out red. We can leave all the other settings. I'm going to hit save there. So I have a category called The War at Home. I'll create another one called The War in Europe. Because that's basically what I'm going to focus on with this, the war in Europe. And let's make that war in Europe a blue of some sort here. Yeah, that'll work. So I've got 2 categories, the war at home and the war in Europe. Now, once I've got those 2 categories in place, I can start adding events to my timeline. And we add events to our timeline, and those are going to be called stories. And this is where we're going to be putting most of our stuff. Like I say, with the free account, you can put a maximum 200 in here. We're going to have like maybe 23, maybe 24. There's not going to be too many. On my little timeline here, I'll put in like 7 or 8 just so we can see as an example. So to create a story, straightforward, you create a story. And then you can give the story a title. And for this one, I'm going to call this the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. There's going to be my title. The date, 28th of June, 1914. It's the first thing in my timeline. It's going to end that same date. I'm going to leave the time to 0. That's fine. I could go in and change them through here. And now the story info is where you're going to explain things to people. In order to explain things to people, we can, I think it's easiest to put it in the intro. We can put it in other places. So to put your data in, I already have a bunch of stuff saved. So you can see here, I already did my research and I have some stuff saved. So you can type directly into the box, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy what I already have done. And see, I can type right in here if I want. So you can enter right there, but I've entered somewhere else, so I can just go control paste. Why do I have a spelling mistake? There we are. So here we are, Sarajevo. It's got an A in there. Sarajevo. That's now spelled right. All right, so I've got my information in there, and this is going to be considered as my group, the war in Europe, which is going to change across the top to that nice blue. And then we've got our story here. So I can hit save on this. And we have our first entry with a story. And you notice how we don't get the full description here. If I just hit that, I now get more of what it is that we're looking for, which is good. And then what I can do with this is I can add extra stuff to it. We can put everything into the intro if you like. And I said, there's other places we can put it in. I'll show you how we can put it in other places. If we want to add a picture to it, fairly straightforward. We're going to go to this media, and we're going to add new media. Now, to enter media here, we can add pictures, documents, you name it, we can add in here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go out and find a good picture of what I'm looking for. So, assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Let's have a look, find a good image that I'm looking for. Well, let's use a newspaper clipping. Newspaper clipping will be good. So I'll just click on this. I'll right click and ask to view the image, so I can get its direct address, and then I'll just copy the image location. Once I've copied the image location, I can come over here, paste it in place, and hit save. And that will put the image in here. Now, sometimes you won't see the full image. So to see the full image, you just kind of click on it and it'll give us that full image nicely up a bit. Now, depending on your screen resolution, you can't always hit these X's over here. So you just close up the admin thing so you can close and see back on your timeline. That's what we get. Now, that is with me putting all of the information into the intro. So when we go into this particular story, and I have all the information in the intro, that's one place to put it in, and that gives us that bit. If I take that information out of there and I save it up, that information goes away. I can put the information in the extra info, and I hit save. And therefore, all you get here is the graphic, and then to see the extra info, you hit more, and then you get that. So there's two different places to put your info in. I don't care if you put it in the intro. I don't care if you put it in the extra info. Just be aware that there are two places in order to put your info in. So I'm just going to leave this one where it is. I got to add a period on the end and then go back to the other part and remove the period that I left in there. So we've got the title, we've got our information in. I say, you can leave the text either in the intro or you can put the text in the extra info. We don't need to worry about the tags. So I've got my first item in, my first item is in, and my first item is under the category, the war in Europe. I'm going to skip a few events, and let's do the first one for Canada getting involved. So all I have to do here is go create a new story. It'll go right under the Archduke. And under that new story, we'll put Canada enters the war. And that is on the 4th of August of 1914. And we're going to make it 000000, because we don't know the specific time. What does it say? A date is outside the timeline range. Let's have a look. What did I do to make the date outside the timeline range? August 1914. Okay, it's in. I don't know what mistake I made earlier, but now it's fixed. So we have Canada enters the war here. We can enter an introduction if we like, or we can put it into the extra info. I have my work done on this already, so I just need to scroll down to my August 4th. I'm going to grab all my info here. And that's going to enter it into there. I'm going to leave it in there. I know it's set at the war at home, so it's going to be shown red because this is Canada directly at home. And then once I save that, I'm going to go to the media, and I'm going to find myself an image for that. And actually, when Canada enters the war, of course, we know it's because Britain declares war on Germany in World War I. So let's see what I can find here. Image-wise, I could use another newspaper article. I could use something like this poster over here. Make sure it's from World War I, not World War II, those kinds of things. Or I could type in something like Canada enters World War I. Variety of different things here. Oh, there's one. I'll use this. It's all about getting Canadians to join up to fight. So I will view that image. I will copy its link location. And then I will go to my media. I will add the new media. I will paste that in place. I will save it. And I have another entry into my timeline on August 4th, just like that. And again, if I wanted to see that, I could go see that. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to do one more on this before I pause it and add a whole bunch of new things so you can see what a timeline can look like. I'll add another story. The new story will be Canada mobilizes the troops. And this one is going to take place over time, so it's not going to be a single event because we're going to talk about basically the first month's worth of stuff. So that's going to be from about August 5th. Confirm to, well, let's make it September 5th. September 5th, zeros along the board. Confirm, and you'll notice they didn't give me, no, it didn't give me this next date because for some reason I didn't save it. September 5th. There we go, confirm. Now we got it. And you'll notice on the dates here, we now get dates from the 5th to the 5th again. It's offset slightly from the war at home because we put it in afterwards. And then all I'm going to do is enter my info that I've got for this. Here we are down just a little bit. Here's my August 5th information. And I'll throw that right in here in the intro. It all works good in the intro. I'll save. And then I just need to go get a media for that. So I'm going to add some new media. Do a quick search, see what we got for images. Mobilizing Canadians. I never want to take the first. Hey, I like this one here because it's actually got the guys in their camp and all of that in the background. We will view the image. We'll copy the image. It even tells us where it is. It's in Valcartier, which is in Quebec. And we'll paste that in here. Oops, did I not get it? Let's try that again. Copy the link location. Paste it in place. Save it. There we go. That nicely comes up. And you'll notice they put in everything just a little bit differently depending on the graphic and depending on how you have it done. And then when I actually click on one of these now that's in place, we have 2 war at homes and 1 war in Europe. When I check the more info, it brings up kind of a slide player. So it says I have 3 stories and I can just go along from one story to the next in order, which is kind of nice. So I'm going to pause the video here right now. I'm going to load this up with a couple of more things so you can see what the timeline is going to kind of look like. And when I come back, you'll see a much more propagated timeline. All right, there was a quick jump cut. I have a whole bunch of new ones propagated in, and you'll notice they're crowding each other. We'll look at that in a bit, but I just want to add one more here. And when I add it, it's a perfect example of what I want for the Canadian stuff. And when I ask in the assignment for why the event is significant, it's a good example of why the event is significant. So we're going to do the Wartime Elections Act for World War I. And in the Wartime Elections Act, actually, just let me revert on that one. I need to create a new story for that. There we go. Wartime Elections Act. Let's find the date for the Wartime Elections Act. That would have been in 1917. And that is going to be September 20th, 1917 is when we brought in the Wartime Elections Act. And I'll confirm that. And then I just want to bring in the text I have written for that. And then I'll show you the text I have written for this. So we'll put that in, we'll save it. And then we'll go to the more section. So you can see an explanation of the Wartime Elections Act, a quick explanation of what it is. In an attempt to get more people to vote for his party, Robert Borden passed the Wartime Elections Act. The bill was passed in hopes more people would support his government in an attempt to solve the conscription crisis caused by his government policies. Now, this is a significant event because it was the first law that gave certain women the right to vote in federal elections. Women directly related, God, I got to fix my spelling here. I've just been putting it together really fast. I should say women directly related to soldiers serving overseas were given the right to vote. This would lead to all women being allowed to vote in subsequent federal elections. That is a big deal. And the fact that I know I can fix that, here we'll go in and fix the spelling. Related to. So it happens when you go too fast and you don't proofread. So significant event and federal elections. There we go. Now it's all saved, and now it looks good. Now we can bring it up. And you can see this is the kind of thing I'm looking for when it comes to Canadian events with the word home and why the events were significant. Now, something else I want to show you in this, I've got events in here, 1917, I got events all the way to 1918, which is of course the end of the war. I've got a battle thrown in here, the Battle of Ypres, way back here in 2015, and because even though Canadians are involved, it is part of the war in Europe because it was not directly at home. But when I back up to the very beginning here, we see we have a whole bunch of these things stacked on top of each other. And it's a little difficult to see that some of these are, you know, one behind the other. We can actually change the way all of this looks. Now, to change the way all of this looks, we come into admin and we come to my timelines. And we should, where are we here? Actually, my timeline. Show all, that's what I want to hit, right there. Show all, and we get Canada and World War I. Never hit the delete. If you do, it's gone. We'll hit the edit button. And the edit allows us to make a number of changes to this. So when we hit the edit, we've got our times, our start date. Let's have a look here. Show all, edit. I want to go to settings. That's what I want to go to. My timeline settings right below it is where I want to go. So we've got our start and our end date right there. It's the spacing that allows us to play with these, which is really kind of cool. So if we go to the spacing, right now we're on standard spacing. If we went equal spacing 1, it's going to space everything out like this. Make things a little wider, make it a little longer. If we go to things like equal spacing 2, well, we have 2 columns with fairly equal spacing. Makes things easier to read. We can also go stuff like top and bottom 5 rows. It's went a little further along. If we do top and bottom 5 rows, what it allows us to do is have things overlap, but it'll be 5 rows high. So you can adjust all sorts of things like this as far as your spacing on how stuff is going to look. We can also go view type, where we can go category bands, where it will give us things based on whether they're in our war at home category or a war in Europe category. We could do colored stories where it's doing exactly the same thing, where we've got our war at home ones all categorized in red. Our war in Europe's are all categorized in blue. It doesn't tell us exactly what the category is, but it at least lets us see that. Or we can do for how long things last. So you can see that things last over a period of time, give us a longer band. There's a variety of different ways we can look at this. I'm going to put mine back to standard at 5, so I get my little pictures and stuff there. And then I can have all things that are close together all nicely stacked on top of each other. We can also put an intro image, or we can throw a background image in. The background images are kind of good. So if you found like an image that you think is quintessentially World War I in Canada, so let's have a look here. Soldiers, World War I. Let's have a quick look at an image. Something that might make a good background image, might be nice and light, stuff that we can still see on. So here is Arthur Currie, and right here's Arthur Currie. Here's a bunch of Canadian soldiers marching by. This is a huge image when we have a look at the size of it at 2,800 pixels. But if I view this image and then do a quick copy image location, and I throw this in as the background image, right, I can then hit save. And that becomes a background image for my entire timeline. That one's actually making it a little bit difficult to see at times. We can also zoom in and out. And this here, you know, a darker image might actually do. So if I can find a darker image, I might throw a darker image in there, but you can see how you can put those in and how you can adjust the timelines. Now, if you get your timeline done and you use Tiki Toki and you want to share it with people, to share it's really simple. This URL, you just take that URL, copy it and paste it to somebody, and they can come in and see your timeline. So building timelines in Tiki Toki is super easy. I've got some examples. I'll put this link up so you can come in and have a look and see sort of some of the examples that I've done. This, of course, is for World War I, and you'd be working for World War II. If you have any questions about this stuff, please get a hold of me by my email.